the work of the California Agricultural Land Equity Task Force. That is the topic. That's what we're going to be going over today. And if we can get the slideshow started, my friend Tessa is going to be supporting with slides today. Thank you so much, Tessa. Um, so just to start, we're going to be going over the last 2 years of work that has culminated in the report, a set of recommendations made to the governor and the legislature regarding how the state of California could increase land access for priority producers and California tribal communities, tribal nations. Next slide. So I wanted to introduce myself really quickly. Next slide. My name is Doria Robinson. I am an agricultural industry member of the State Board of Food and Agriculture. I serve on the State Board of Food and Agriculture, and I was one of 12 members of the task force that helped to bring forward this set of recommendations. Next slide. So our agenda today is just to really go over the full background of the task force, give you some context. How do we come to these recommendations? What all did we do to learn about the topics? We're going to actually go and do an overview of the report. If anybody's seen the report, that's already available now. It's available on the Strategic Growth Council's website. It's quite dense. So we're going to do an overview to kind of show you how the sections work, and then finally give you some time to ask some questions. Because we really want it to be a document that people really dive into and really understand what the recommendations are. Next slide. All right. So what was the California Agricultural Land Equity Task Force? This task force was established in the 2022 California budget to develop recommendations on how to equitably increase access to agricultural land for food production and traditional tribal agricultural uses. It was a 13-member appointed body. That included 3 tribal task force members. So those are 3 members of different California tribes had representation on the task force. It was the diverse set of expertise between the task force members, lots of different backgrounds, geography, and the final report will be delivered actually tomorrow to the governor and the legislature at the Strategic Growth Council meeting, although the final report is available now, and I think somebody put a link to it in the chat. Feel free to flip through it as we talk. So what is agricultural land equity? This is a big question. We spent a lot of time trying to make sure that we had clear definitions of all these things so that we were all talking about the same thing when we worked through the report. So the definitions that we landed on for agricultural land equity was when priority producers and tribal land stewards have access to secure, affordable, and viable land for stewardship and the cultivation of food, fiber, medicine, and cultural resources without systemic barriers, disparities, or exploitation. So for us, the idea of land equity, I think, is really important to point out, also includes land tenure, not just land acquisition. Because it's great to be able to acquire the land, to hold the land, to access the land, but then you also need the capacity, the support to hold that land. And there's a lot of different things that, kind of after the acquisition that can make holding the land and actually working on the land difficult. We defined priority producers and tribal land stewards as those who have been historically and systematically excluded from land ownership and secure tenure of agriculture and traditional tribal uses. This includes farm workers and aspiring farmers. And then California Native American tribes, both federally recognized and non-federally recognized California Native American tribes. This term, it includes both of those different categories. We felt like that was also an important thing. This term was selected to denote the inherent sovereignty of Native communities and the relations of care since time immemorial with the land that is now called California. So we're being very specific that we want to include both federally and unfederally recognized, but we clearly understand that there is a clear difference between the two, that there's a relationship, a nation-to-nation relationship with federally recognized tribes that non-recognized tribes do not have yet, hopefully, and that there is a clearly a different relationship with the land for California Native tribal members than for, anyone who is native to anywhere. And then finally, the definition of agriculture that we'll be using throughout the report is the knowledge and practice of cultivating plants, animals, ecosystems for food, fiber, medicine, and other resources. This includes gardening, horticulture, ranching, and traditional ecological knowledge practices, among others. So this is not the exhaustive list of all the things it includes, but we wanted to give some examples. Next slide. Great. So how did the task force develop its recommendations? First and foremost, we had meetings. We had task force meetings between October 23rd, October 2023, and December 2025. So 2 years of meetings. We had public meetings. We also had subcommittee meetings and working groups. So those were when, small sets of task force members would take on a particular topic and work through ideas, look at research, ask more questions, draw on our technical advisory committee to help us answer and in order to ultimately shape the recommendations. Next slide. We also did really extensive community engagement. So we started with a land access survey that gathered the experiences of priority producers and tribal land stewards to understand what exactly people were experiencing when it comes to trying to access land or trying to hold land or have land tenure. During our different meetings, we also invited guest speakers, different peoples with different expertise, some people who were just talking about their own experience trying to access land. We did site visits, a number of different site visits, and community engagement sessions, so special sessions with different parts of different communities. Again, hear what's happening in different parts of the state. So we traveled all across the state having these conversations with different communities for 2 years. We also had tribal leader meeting invitations, so sent invitations to specific California tribes and had a special kind of process with them and took a lot of public comment. Next slide. So the community engagement sessions, these are a couple of examples of a couple of the sessions that we took. So sometimes these happened simultaneously with when we had a meeting in a different geography. Sometimes they happened independently. So one of the independent sessions we had was in Kern County with Black Farmers Association session. Really powerful moment to hear back from the experience of people in Kern County and how they, lost land due to discrimination throughout the history of California, really exposing a kind of history that we normally associated with the Southern United States and positioning that in the landscape of California and really making it clear that, California has a long history of deep discrimination that has made it really difficult for Black farmers, in this case, to access and hold land, sometimes even leading to having their land taken from them due to systemic or direct racism. We also had another listening session in Coachella, the Milpa sessions. Over 20 participants participated in it. It was a combination of current and former farm workers and small farmers. They were listened, engaged about their challenges and aspirations. So these are just two examples of the engagement sessions. We had many, but I wanted to get you a feel of what these were. So these are independent meetings in the places where these different groups were. We also went to Allensworth and spoke to the folks there. And it just helped to inform our process. Thank you. And next slide. So now we want to spend some time and really get into the anatomy of the report, because as I said, it's pretty dense. So just an overview of the report. There's three main sections. The first section is kind of what is agricultural land equity. The next is historical injustices and contemporary disparities. So, and the next section would be the future benefits of agricultural land equity for all Californians. So this is the first part of the report. We felt like it was really important to, one, name our terms, make sure everybody's using the same language. To really create the case and set the scene so people who may not be aware of all the history that has happened around land access and disparities and systemic oppression when it comes to land, have some sense of what we're talking about when we say that this has been a problem for California. So there's a whole section of the report that really outlines all of these all of this history, and also outlines the current disparities in terms of who owns land in the state of California and who doesn't. So next slide. So just to go a little bit deeper in that, California quite clearly was built on stolen land and forced labor. Immigration laws, exclusion acts, and broken treaties all have added to this history of repression. There have been denied property rights and exploitive labor conditions in California. Next slide. The contemporary disparities include, if you look at this pie chart, 82% of the land owners are white in the state of California. 9.6% are Hispanic, 3.9% Asian, 3.8% American Indian or Alaskan Native, and 0.3% African American. They also include Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders at 0.9%. So it's a huge, huge disparity. It does not mimic the actual percentages of our population who are these different ethnicities. So there's something definitely happening here that makes it so, not everyone has the same access to land. Next slide. Contemporary disparities, 62% of producers operate less than 50 acres. So most producers are operating on much smaller plots of land. Number of small farmers in the state has decreased by 13% since 2017 and 2022. Large farms have increased by 4%. This points to a worsening land consolidation and financialization. Just 4.6% of landowners collectively own almost half of the state's total cropland. So I'm just going to say that again. 4.6% of landowners collectively own half of the state's total cropland. The value of farm real estate has increased by 28%. since 2018. So one of the things that you'll hear about later is that we really did consider and include in our recommendations the financialization of land and how that is becoming an increasingly troubling barrier to land access. Next slide. So the recommendations. So for a bold, concrete strategy towards addressing the land crisis, our recommendations were to first prioritize tribal stewardship and land return. Number two, fund and incentivize land acquisition for priority producers and tribal land stewards. Number three, halt and mitigate and reverse agricultural land consolidation. Four, preserve California's agricultural land while prioritizing equitable land access and stewardship. Number five, prioritize and secure land tenure. And number six, support urban agriculture. Next slide. So those are actually the main sections of the report. If you look at the report, each of those sections has a whole set of nested recommendations that support that main recommendation. So, for example, under the number one, prioritize tribal stewardship and land return, you will get nested recommendations that include establish an ancestral land return fund, embed ancestral land return for California Native tribes in the state's policies and programs, return publicly held land to California Native tribes, enable and promote the implementation of traditional ecological knowledge and cultural practices. So under each one of these numbered points, bullet points, 1.2, 1.1, whatever, there are sub points that would help you realize each one of these goals or recommendations. Next slide. The second area of focus was fund and incentivize land acquisition for priority producers and tribal land stewards. In order to get there, the recommendations include establishing a restorative land fund. I think we said that because when we did a survey of all the different state grants or programs that were available for individuals to help them access land, we found less than 5 programs that were actually grant programs that helped with acquisition. Most were kind of capacity building, technical assistance programs that didn't directly assist with acquisition. So we felt quite clearly that there needed to be a fund. To develop and implement public education campaign to document past and ongoing harm. I think that many people do not learn the history of California. That includes, all of the things that we began to bring to light in the report. And that it was really important that we make this a part of our education, a part of maybe grade 4 education, that people learn about this part of the history of California. The next point is provide funding for the purchase of agricultural land to be leased or transferred to priority producers and tribal land stewards. So again, another kind of strategy, sometimes due to how quick sales will happen, how you need to mobilize lots of money quickly in order to be able to have the timing to be able to get involved with a sale. We propose that there would be some kind of public-private partnership between nonprofits or foundations that would help to facilitate these land transfers, and that the state could play a role in helping this happen through grant programs. So the next one is establish a loan and debt forgiveness programs. This one I was really excited about. I'll talk a little bit more about it later. Adopt new tax programs and benefits designed to serve priority producers and tribal land stewards. Continually evaluate and improve funding and incentive programs. So we spend a lot of time looking at existing grant programs and trying to understand how those could be made to be more accessible, less onerous in terms of how much you have to write and how much you have to report and things like that, so that more people could access it. And then expand tailored technical assistance for land access and acquisition. That one was also pretty exciting because technical assistance is important. And we really heard when we went out and did those listening sessions that there was more need for technical assistance around tenure as well. So around zoning and, kind of water access and land rights. And so legal technical assistance kind of post acquisition, as well as the kind of technical assistance that would help people acquire land. Next slide. So the third category of recommendations is to halt, mitigate, and reverse agricultural land consolidation. And this whole section is really focusing on the commodification of land, the financialization of land. I think the boldest recommendation is to limit land ownership by investment companies. And we propose a few ways to do that. The next one is to develop local first opportunity to purchase ordinance for primary producers and tribal land stewards, so giving those folks an opportunity to first bid on, refuse, first right of refusal for when a piece of land comes up for sale. Because again, those sales happen, they're not well publicized sometimes, and people don't have an opportunity to even, try to make a bid for it. Establish a California Producers Retirement Fund. This is also something that came up. And the thought was that one of the things that really pushes this point are keeps pushing us towards the financialization of land is that, for a farmer, their land is their retirement fund. Like that's what they have often. And, you know, there isn't a backup plan. There isn't, another safety net. And so when it comes to the end of a farmer's farming career, they have to sell the land for as much money as they could get in order to have the retirement that they want. Um, and even if they would like for it to go to another farmer, maybe they're not getting the offers that they need from other farmers, and it will go to some kind of other development. So we thought that establishing a California producer retirement fund would help mitigate that push on farmers. Establish and fund a land market monitoring program. So this is also an exciting idea that we could help to make visible all of the different ways that agricultural land is moving in and out of the market, kind of track it and understand it so that more policy, better policy can be made as we understand what's happening. Next slide. So the fourth area of recommendations. So like I said, this is a very dense report with lots of good stuff in there. Was to preserve California's agricultural land while prioritizing equitable land access and stewardship. So the idea here was to develop a statewide agricultural land preservation and stewardship plan. And this was focusing on that kind of rare um, agricultural land um, that is that prime agricultural land, prime topsoil, and thinking of it as something special that should be preserved, should be kept in cultivation, but should be cared for in a special way and should be monitored and stewarded in a special way, and really create a different category for that kind of prime agricultural land that the state tracks and really thinks about, especially when development pressures are being put on that land, if that's the best use of this very rare land. Um, the second here is improve conservation programs and tools to enable equitable access to land and stewardship, just addressing some of the problems and issues that people have with um, some of our uh, um, some of our land organizations and The third is promote local strategies for agriculture for land preservation. And the fourth is expand state and local government capacity to effectively and fairly lease publicly held land. So that was another thought, is that the state of California actually owns a lot of land, and could what portion of that land is arable, what portion could be used for agriculture, and of that portion, how can we create a program to help priority producers who may not have the money to purchase their own land to be able to lease or use that land for production. Next slide. Prioritize and protect secure land tenure. So this is a whole section that we included because we realized that the issue of land access doesn't end at the acquisition. So the first recommendation here is to address power imbalances in land tenant relationships. The next is expand the capacity of CDFA's Farmer Equity Office so that it can better advocate for priority producers. Establish and fund regional ag ombudsman positions, because you've really realized that some of the barriers that people are experiencing are really geographically specific. They're specific to a specific jurisdiction. They're specific to a specific set of zoning code. And in order to help people navigate those different barriers, we really needed somebody who in the region who could act as that ag ombudsman to help priority producers through those different hoops and barriers. Address inequitable policy consequences while respecting the intention of the law. So this is addressing, things like different policies, like, kind of our water and other policies that make it really difficult for priority producers to operate. Maybe we need to consider those regulations in terms of the scale of people, of what people are producing at, make it easier for people to be compliant, or adjust compliancy based on the scale of production. And number 5, incentivize and support local governments to adopt zoning and land use planning practices that facilitate secure land tenure and stewardship. Great. And the last section, section 6, focuses on urban agriculture. Was realizing that there is, a lot of folks who are producing in urban landscapes, and they have a specific and very unique sets of barriers to land access and to land tenure. So the first would be to ensure eligibility of urban producers and tribal land stewards in existing programs and provide tailored funding. So oftentimes for urban agriculture producers, because of the scale that they're operating at, or that they're not producing for profit often, they're often producing for health benefits to help with their communities in different ways, to help support community engagement. They don't qualify for some of the programs that exist. So kind of adjusting those rules to support the practice of urban ag and tribal land stewardship. And then finally, make land available for urban agriculture and address barriers to secure tenure. So some of those things sound like very broad categories, but if you open the report, you will see that there are many subsections that give a lot more detailed ideas and recommendations for how you could achieve these overarching goals. And next slide. And I am going to say that I am going to leave time at the end to go back and address all of the different questions and comments that are in the chat and in the Q&A. If you do have questions, please do use the Q&A. We'd love to address them as best as I can. Yeah, I think that it's really important. So please use the Q&A. All right, highlights from the ground. We wanted to kind of bring forward a few of the things that were really exciting for us as members. And one of them was that producer retirement fund. And just wanted to kind of uplift that, I already said kind of the why of the producer retirement fund, but the how was also interesting. So the proposal is that this fund would be established from the fees associated with restricting land ownership by financial institutions so that they would actually help pay for this based on the land that they are allowed to hold. So that's an interesting and powerful idea. And then the public education campaign. Um, the public education campaign we just felt like was just it's just so important. All of these things are proposals. None of them are going to come to pass unless we can get the political power that we we can advocate for any one or all a collection of these recommendations. But in order to do that, I think that people need to understand the why. Why do we even need these things? Why do we need these recommendations? And without having that education campaign, you're not going to have voters who understand the why. You're not going to have that groundswell of support that can help us pass things at a statewide level or to get support for the different recommendations that are here. So we really felt like it was very important to have this public education campaign that would be a widespread thing, maybe through the schools, again, maybe in that fourth grade California history education that includes some of this information, and then other ways too. Expansion of the CDFA and satellite offices. So this was particularly around the equity office. Right now, currently, there's one person who runs the farmer equity office, and she's amazing, but can only be so effective when you have a whole state with so many different challenges, so many different geographies, so many different barriers. Without an expansion of that office and more support, again, we're not going to be able to move these things from an institutional level. Um, Next slide. All right, that is the overview. And now we're going to spend a lot of time just answering the rest of the time, really, just answering questions and maybe getting into some sections of the report. So the one question that we have for you is, what recommendations are most compelling to you? And the second is, how would these recommendations support you in your work if adopted and implemented? Um, and then I will talk about where we are with next steps. We'll take a few questions, and before we wrap up, we'll talk next steps. So I realized that when I introduced myself, I didn't totally introduce myself. So outside of being a CDFA board member, I am also an urban agriculture practitioner in Richmond, California. I run Urban Tilth, or a 20-year-old urban agriculture organization. We operate a 10-acre urban farm as well as 7 different other sites. We feed about 400 families every week through our production, and we also partner with 13 small family BIPOC farmers within 100 miles of Richmond, bringing in their food to help supply food to areas that are known as food deserts in Richmond, through free farm stands, and a variety of other programs, as well as a partnership with Contra Costa Health Services of VeggieRx, where we fulfill produce prescriptions for people suffering from diabetes and high blood pressure and other chronic ailments. So that's me, a third generation Richmond resident. Um, my people came from Louisiana, from farming communities there. All right, so let's get into some questions and some comments. So I'm going to try to navigate this uh, chat to see what we have here. Excuse me if I miss anything. So we have, what about an agricultural zone that does not have a residential overlay? So ag land stays as ag land. Right, right. So that's some of the issues that we have. There's some really great recommendations within the plan around zoning, and addressing I think the section, especially around prime ag land, is really talking about conservation of that ag land and not opening it up for residential or other forms of development because it's, kind of positioning it as a kind of rare resource, that topsoil, that it is literally rare, and treating it as something to conserve, right? You want to keep it in production, but you want to keep, like caring for it deeply. And this is that moment where I could use a little support going through all of these questions. Um, okay. Hopefully that
Yeah.
was helpful.
Hey, Doria.
Yeah,
Sorry. I'm happy to read you these questions if that would be
great.
helpful.
Yes.
Great. Okay.
Thank you.
I introduced myself in the chat, but hi, everybody. I am a staff support on this project working at Strategic Growth Council. So let's see. You got the zoning one. There was a question about, is that slide showing Bianca of Community Roots Farm? I don't believe so. I don't believe we met Bianca along this process.
Yeah.
Big thank you to Doria for your contribution to the SF Bay agricultural sector. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and experience.
Thank you.
Then I offered my intro there and just encouraged everyone to share your answers to the questions that Doria is prompting in the chat here and just making sure you're typing to everyone so everyone can read what you're saying. Here's a question. I'm interested in chemical-free farming. Do any of your topic subsets include that?
So we didn't address specifically, chemical-free farming, except through one of the things that I personally really like, because I'm also interested in chemical-free farming, and that is the loan forgiveness program. So what we proposed is that where there are programs where loans are available to primary producers to access land to be able to, farm or do traditional tribal practices, that if those um, tribal land stewards and priority producers use regenerative practices on the land, for every year that they use those practices, they earn some loan forgiveness. That there is an exchange between the, the state of California and that producer for caring for California lands in a way that helps us reach our climate goals, our soil goals, our land care goals. We felt like that would be a really powerful way to open up land access and also increase the amount of people who might use such practices on the land.
Great. The next comment is a response to your question, which was that most compelling to me is ombudsman and any zoning permitting exemptions, help dealing with the county and regulatory fees, permits, licenses, etc.
Yeah. One of the things that we made available in the urban agriculture section is some examples of an urban agriculture ordinance that actually was something that I worked on for 2 years in California in Richmond, and how we amended the general plan to reduce uh, the amount of permits you would need to do regular farming practices in an urban area, to convert some permits to admin permits, to from conditional permits that are less expensive, to have things be at a certain scale before you would need so much regulatory action, so many permits. So we have those as examples in the appendix of the report.
Hmm. So Jen says, I loved the idea of analyzing where prime ag land is and making sure it is protected and accessible. Is there anyone working on mapping out California's ag land?
I think that there are some mapping that exists. It feels from our research that it was very distributed, that it wasn't in a kind of a centralized place, and that I think that one of the things when we first envisioned the I forget what it's called, um the we were at one
Farm,
point calling it the Land Observatory, but then we changed.
farmland mapping and monitoring.
Yeah, the mapping and monitoring, that a part of that was not just about sales, but about like where is the ag land? Where is it located? What state is it in? I think the USDA has some maps, but I don't think that it includes every land, all lands that are being used for cultivation.
Darlene says, thanks for the great work you all did to develop the recommendations. Great overview presentation. Wendy says, I'd like to learn more about mechanisms to limit land ownership by investment companies. These companies are buying up vineyard land right now. The Sonoma County Permit Director wants to learn how to limit this, as do many residents.
Yeah. This is not my area of expertise, but I really would focus you on that area of the report where folks that did have that expertise, put forward some recommendations that were specific to that topic. I do say that I wear another hat in Richmond, that is as a city council member. And one of the things that we just did here that doesn't have to do specifically with ag land, but it does have to do with land consolidation and financialization of land and buildings and homes, was we are now exploring an ordinance that would limit the number of properties that that an individual or a corporation could own in the city of Richmond. And our city attorney is looking into what might be possible. So this is definitely a huge topic. It is exacerbating housing. It is exacerbating land access for agriculture. And I think that as a state, we really need to figure this out and address it.
Great. And just to the land mapping question from before, Colleen shared the Department of Conservation mapping effort, so people can take a look there as
Yeah,
well.
great.
And then regarding access to funding, Dusty asks, regarding access to funding to purchase agricultural land, what programs are available to secure land, such as assistance with down payments? And I'll just note, Doria, before you maybe want to give a longer answer, the spreadsheet that the task force developed with all of the different resources,
Yeah.
which we share.
And that spreadsheet is available on the SGC site, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, we did a lot of work and we really wanted to make sure all the work that we did, even if it didn't land in the report or if it's only in the appendix, was available to everyone. So one of the things we created was a spreadsheet that literally laid out every single program we could find that the state of California offers to help people access land, and kind of detailed exactly what it would support and what it would not support. So I highly encourage you to look at that. I'm not going to remember all the things that are there off the top of my head. And is that in the appendix too? I can't remember if that made it
It
into.
is. Yep.
It's in the appendix of the report. We're trying to share the information out so people know even what already exists.
Great. Thanks, Doria. I'm going to move from the chat. We'll come back to the chat, but I'm going to go to the Q&A feature. There are a couple specific questions in here. Beth says these recommendations are so powerful and promising. Thank you. Was the order of the recommendations intentional? Did the task force prioritize which of these recommendations was most urgent, important, or needs to happen before others?
So I would say that the order is absolutely intentional. The order of the sections, to some extent, the order of the recommendations, less so than the order of the sections. I don't, excuse me, I don't think that we were thinking about urgency as much as importance and impact when we were thinking about, what that order would be. I think we really knew that this was going to be a very dense report. And if we didn't, top load the things that we felt were the most important, then they might not be seen. People might not make it that far. So there is some we are saying something about the order of things.
Great. And Roger is wondering if you are located in Bakersfield.
Nope, I'm located in Richmond, but I do have family, lots of family in Bakersfield. But no, I'm a Richmond girl.
Great. And then we have a couple of anonymous questions. I'd like to learn more about mechanisms to limit land ownership by investment companies. Okay, so this was kind of a repeat from the chat. These companies are buying up vineyard land,
Right.
and County Permit Director wants to know.
Again, that's not a topic that I have personal expertise on. I learned a lot through this process. There were people who were members of the task force who were in the legal field who do have a lot of work in that area, and they made a lot of recommendations uh, around that topic. So I really encourage you to look at that section and then maybe follow up with some of the members who have more expertise than I do. Thinking of Dorian in particular.
There's a question about if you could share more about how this could fit into fourth grade curriculum on California history. Could this be part of programs like Walk Through California?
Well, yeah, I mean, it occurs to me that depending on what school district you're in or you know, how much do people learn about the impact of internment on agricultural families, on Japanese agricultural families, and what happened to their land post when they returned after internment? How much do people really learn about that? How much do people learn about the kind of the racism that Black farmers experienced in Kern County and how their land was taken from them, or the impact of various, federal loan programs on Black farmers and how the number of Black farmers has decreased in the state of California? How much do people learn about the Bracero program, about all the different farm workers and the impacts over time in the state of California, even the current state of farm workers in California, as a part of California history? How many people learn that the first enslaved people in California were Native Americans, and what happened to them, and that there was even, slavery happening in California, and how that impacted native lands. I think all of these things, we learn about the missions from very interesting perspective, but we don't learn a comprehensive, complete kind of retelling of everything that really went on throughout our history, our short history as a state. And I think that it would do Californians well, because I think that there's a false understanding that some of these things that happened historically around the United States didn't happen in California. And I think that that's wrong, and that people, if they knew about it, they would understand more why programs or recommendations like these are needed. So yeah, I think that we could think about how we talk about these things and how we introduce them to our kids so they have a more full understanding of their history, and a sense of responsibility for keep bending our arc of history towards justice.
Thank you, Doria. There's a lot more questions, so we still have a half an hour, but just pacing ourselves here. What role do you think resource conservation districts play in terms of creating or protecting equitable land access, and specifically related to the conservation programs that you mentioned?
Yeah, there was a lot of talk about the resource conservation districts and the roles that they could play. I think there was also some critique about their current roles and inclusion, um, and other things. So in that section, there are more recommendations that go into more detail. About the resource conservation districts and the roles that they could play. I think we also were really careful to make sure that we weren't saying that they weren't the only party that could play a role in conservation in the state, but they were definitely a key partner. And I think that there is some work to do around kind of making sure that everyone who are in those districts, who are staffing those districts, um, are well aware of the history and have ways to interact with primary producers that are supportive and respectful. Um, and yeah, I hope that is it's such a big kind of field. I hope that was a beginning of an answer, and then I'm gonna point you to the report um, for more details.
Okay, next question. Did the task force discuss the overlap between many of the policy recommendations and the programmatic policy components of reparations? I'm thinking particularly about tax law disincentivizing land consolidation.
Yeah, we had one meeting where it was I think it was a subcommittee meeting or a working group meeting where we had kind of a report and a dialogue with folks that were working on the California reparations work. And yeah, we definitely discussed the overlap. We definitely discussed, I think we even referred to um the reparations task force work in our report. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tessa.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
we
believe
do.
so.
So yeah, there's a lot of overlap. There's certain things that are we tried to um use their work and uplift it within our work, so we weren't just replicating, but actually kind of referring and uplifting. Um, yeah,
Yeah, there's a few references in the report to the reparations task force. And I think one of the things that was mentioned in that meeting that you just referred to
yeah,
was that the reparations task force did not address agricultural land as explicitly as obviously this work is doing.
yeah, definitely.
So next question. Okay, regarding access to funding to purchase agricultural land, what program? Okay, we already got that one. What programs are available? We mentioned the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
At the county level, what are some of the biggest ways that different jurisdictions support or discourage equitable land access?
Um, That's kind of a hard question when I think about it. I think that, the county has primary jurisdiction around what depending on if you're in unincorporated or incorporated counties, either county or the city that has jurisdiction around kind of zoning and building code and things like that. Less so around purchasing land, but rather what you can use the land for. So we heard some really alarming stories from farmers who, worked really, really hard to earn enough money, save enough money to buy pieces of land. And then when they purchased the land, they found that the land was burdened with various, unpermitted construction, that became then the burden of the new owner, and they would need, an additional, hundreds of thousands of dollars to correct the situation, which made it, impossible for them to get their kind of farming operation up and going. They had lack of access to water, which is kind of a state issue. There was other road issues, a lot of kind of technical and legal issues that would occur that might land in the county's realm of influence. I think that there are also so that's one kind of category where the county could play a role in kind of, easing access or making it more difficult for people to not only access but to hold tenure on land. I think also that counties often own land. And one of the things that I like to put forward is the example of urban tilth, that the land that we are owned was actually owned by Contra Costa County. And we were able to create a relationship with the county for this land that they were not using, that was a part of an old flood control district project that they just were holding because of the need for them to have some buffer around their levee project. And hadn't really nothing had been happening with it for over 40 years in an old agricultural area. And so we were able to, get a long-term lease with them for that land at an amount that wasn't, meant to make a profit because of what we were intending to do with the land. So I think that, there are opportunities for counties, if they would like to champion such a thing, to look at what land they hold. If is there any that is appropriate for agriculture? What are they currently doing for it? And could there be a higher purpose, a public land for the public good, that they could help facilitate access to land using land that they already own?
Great. Okay, we're going to take this conversation a different direction with a big question from Gideon. It says farmer, full-time community member in general, rabble rouser. So referring to recommendation 2.3 through 5 and 3.3, those are the ones that he finds most compelling and the most revolutionary to help us break out of the devastating financialization and consolidation that we see. So his question is, or comment rather, is we've got some massive political organizing ahead of us. The education campaign aside for just a moment, what do you see as the next step in building that support? And then he notes that the farmer, especially when farmers are geographically pretty spread out and rural.
Right. So that my first thing I say is yes, yes, we need to organize, you know. This report was done. It has a great potential of sitting on a shelf and a digital shelf and become digitally dusty if we don't, you know, if we don't get in the hands of more people, we don't get people actually looking through and considering what all is being up and offered up as ideas in this, and then collecting together with folks like CAFF, with folks like some of the other uh kind of farmer support organizations, and really asking ourselves which one of these or a set of these or all of these recommendations that we want to champion, which ones do we feel like we have, we could cultivate the political will to implement. And then we need to organize and show up and rally our different legislature members of the legislature to support and bring bills forward and work on, kind of regional and other levels to make these things happen. We need to support the ideas and support putting the funding in place, so that they actually have a real life and can make real impact. And I think that in my mind, there's a few steps. One is we need more people to actually read the content of the report, not just these top level things that I'm talking about, but get into the nitty gritty, get into the weeds, really look at the detailed recommendations. Two, we need people to gather together with other organized organizations and bodies, because we're stronger together. We're stronger when we act together with CAF, when we act together with some of these other organizations, rather than as single individual farmers or individual land stewards or individual food advocates or individuals who want justice. I think that we also need to think outside of our box and make sure that we're creating alliances with allies that are in adjacent kind of justice-oriented work, organizing work, to make sure they know about this and that they can support these efforts under a larger kind of umbrella. But I think that this is a moment where we need to read the document, we need to understand, we need to figure out which ones that we find we really want to push and move forward. We need to collect together with others, and then we need to bring it, find those legislatures who would support it and move it forward, and then keep, that organizing work until we can get some things passed. Hopefully that's helpful. Yeah.
The next question is kind of going back to maybe the RCD question, but about land trusts. So what role can a land trust play in connecting landowners with farmable land to interested tenants?
Yeah, so land trusts are directly addressed in the report in a few different, a whole area and a bunch of different areas. So, land trusts play a key role today in having and increasing access to land for their tenants. Um, During our sessions, we definitely heard challenges that primary producers have when working with land trusts. We heard about, again, this idea that if you are leasing land, and spending your life as a farmer improving that land but not building any equity, then when it comes to your retirement, um, and oftentimes people who are farming are literally living kind of crop cycle to crop cycle. They, you don't have retirement, and you don't have an asset because you don't own a farm. And so that was definitely brought up as one of the issues, in terms of it's great that they're able to preserve land, that they're able to give access, but then there's these kind of life cycle issues that need to be addressed. Also, people noted some uh, just troubling relationships with some land trusts that maybe weren't so equitable. in terms of the agreements that they have and things like that. So we definitely encouraged um a review of practices and kind of a set of best practices that land trusts can use when working with priority producers and an idea where if they're you know encouraging that the priority producers are in more of decision-making roles and yeah, have more autonomy on the land.
Somewhat of a response to this and the RCD question from Colleen says, I work at Alameda County RCD, and I think it would make a lot of sense for us as an agency to identify a few recommendations from the report to prioritize in our strategic plan.
Yeah,
And there's quite a few other comments in the chat. I'm going to just skim for questions so we can keep it going. We just have a few more minutes here.
right. I just want
Mary,
to say
oh
for
yeah, go ahead.
Colleen that I love that. Like, please do. That's actually another way that people could get involved. If you or your organization find elements, recommendations, specific recommendations that you could incorporate into your, strategic plan, into your and then kind of move them forward in that way. That's a great way to keep this work alive and bring it to life and bring it into the world.
Mary offers that as a land conservation staff, she's curious to hear about some of the challenges that people have experienced, welcoming kind of sharing of those details, and are those best practices for relationships included in the report?
Tessa, did we did we include what those recommendations were? I can't remember.
I'm gonna direct people to section 4
Yeah,
about conservation, and
yeah,
there are quite a few details. I don't
right,
know, I don't think they were framed as best practices, but there are quite a
right.
few details in there.
I don't think we made like a document that was specifically like these are the best practices, but rather said that we should develop the best practices. I think in if you some of the report backs from different sessions that we have, you can hear more about the experiences people, different priority producers have had. And yeah, and that would help you understand like why there's this kind of stilted language and a recommendation around equity and when working with priority producers for land conservation agencies, organizations, and for land trusts.
Um, I think this will probably be the last question, and then folks are leading you into what is next, which I know you already have planned. This question is if county-owned land is public information somewhere. I don't, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if we had the land tracking or a project, then maybe it would be. In Richmond, we had an effort to make public the land that we own as a city, because the city also owns a lot of land. And we made a land policy around it that actually states, that whenever possible, whenever not subject to the Surplus Land Act or as an exception to the Surplus Land Act, we would like to have public land for the public good be a guiding principle. I think other jurisdictions could think about that. They can actually, we went through a process of pulling together that list. You have to as a jurisdiction for the Surplus Land Act. So this information must exist because all California jurisdictions have to identify the land that they own as a compliance with the Surplus Land Act. I think that one of the things that we could ask folks to do is to make that public and then to bring forward in our different jurisdictions. I could even kind of share out our kind of policy around public land for the public good, which is something that could be adopted, adjusted for different jurisdictions around the state of California. That could open up land access for folks depending on what's available.
Wonderful. Thanks for all these really good questions. The next one that we can just kind of wrap up with is what's next for the task force? Is this report the culmination of the task force, or will you all continue to promote the implementation of these recommendations?
Yeah, so sadly, It's been such a powerful 2 years. I've never seen so much of the state of California talk to so many different types of producers and tribal members and tribal nation representatives. It's been truly transformative for me personally. I hope that it helped to inform the recommendations to make sure that they were really meeting all the different diverse needs that we have in the state. But this is the end of the task force. We're actually having our closing celebration in Sacramento on Tuesday, and then presenting the report to the Strategic Growth Council on Wednesday, and that's the formal end of the work and the task force as a body. Um, some of us, like myself, who, are for whatever reason feel compelled, will be accepting opportunities to continue to speak about the work in different spaces. So I'm going to go down to LA and just as an individual, speak about my role on the task force, probably give a very similar presentation that we did today at a different conference. I'm open to if I have the ability to do that for other venues, and I think other task force members I have volunteered to do the same because we really want to make sure that this gets out. And yeah, the future is unknown. The future is up to us. Nothing will happen if we do nothing. If we do take some of the considerations that we said, like bringing it forward in your strategic plans, if there are different organizations, read it for one, deeply, and really consider which things are you passionate about? What do you want to bring forward? If we don't gather together with other organizations who are organizing around these things, then nothing will happen. This is it. It'll be a moment where we had great thoughts, deep thoughts, and then you know, onward without the change that we need. So I think this is a moment for organizing, a moment for commitment, a moment for moving these ideas forward. So that's kind of where we are. And there are some other kind of next steps you could do. The task force meeting on the 24th is from 1 to 4 p.m. You can go to the website. You can join and give public comment I think at both of the meetings that are coming up, both the one on the 24th and on the 25th. And we actually really encourage you to give public comment. That helps to build momentum and make sure people know that this won't be just forgotten. We have links here to the task force webpage, a direct link to the report. Please download it. Please explore the task force webpage too, because it has all of the different meeting notes and agendas and all of the research that we did. Please save it. We do not know how long this paid webpage is going to be up. We were not able to make kind of a permanent commitment to the webpage. So please go there and glean anything you can. And then just keep showing up for these ideas in land equity and land justice in California. Yeah, thank you. That's what I have.
Well, thank you so much, Doria, for being with us today and everyone for attending. It's such a huge conversation, and I'm so glad that you and all the other members of the task force took the time to really dig into this on behalf of farmers and on behalf of California. So, folks who are still there listening, please take action, speak up. Spread the word and figure out how you can apply these recommendations in your own community and to keep on putting pressure on the state to continue implementing those across California. And with that, thank you so much for attending. We hope to see you at the next workshop here at the California Small Farm Conference.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you so much for your time.